There is a fighter jet sitting in a hangar right now that the United States government has never allowed a single allied nation to purchase. Not Britain, not Australia, not Japan, not even Israel. Countries that fly American jets, countries that have bled alongside American soldiers in combat, countries that are considered among the closest strategic partners the United States has on the planet. All of them have been told no, and the answer has been no for over 2 decades. That jet is the F-22 Raptor, and today we are going to explain exactly why. Not just the political reasons, not just the bureaucratic ones, but the real reasons, the ones that go deep into what this aircraft actually does, what it can actually see, what it can actually become in a future battlefield, and why the people who built it and the people who fly it understand that sharing it with anyone, even a friend, is a risk the United States simply will not take. If you find stories like this fascinating, subscribe right now. Over 95% of people watching this video have never subscribed. It takes 2 seconds, and it means you never miss a video like this one. Now let us get into it, because this story is not just about a jet. It is about power. It is about secrets. It is about the nature of military dominance in the modern world. And once you understand all of it, you will never look at an air show the same way again. Let us start at the beginning. The F-22 Raptor was not built to be impressive. It was built to be invisible. And there is a difference between those two things that matters enormously. Most fighter jets in history were built around a core idea: fly fast, carry weapons, hit targets, come home. The F-22 was built around a completely different idea. It was built around the concept of fighting and winning before the enemy ever knows a fight has started. To understand why that is revolutionary, you have to understand what air combat actually looked like before the Raptor arrived. For most of the Cold War era, air combat was a violent, chaotic, close-range affair. Pilots called it a furball. Jets would merge at high speed, twist and turn and climb and dive, each pilot trying to get behind the other, trying to get a missile lock, trying not to get killed. It required extraordinary skill, reflexes, courage, and luck. The best pilots won most of the time, but it was still a contest. It was still a fight that both sides could participate in. The F-22 was designed to make that contest obsolete. It was designed so that by the time an enemy pilot knows the Raptor is there, the missile has already been fired, the Raptor has already turned away, and the enemy aircraft is already dead. That is not a figure of speech. That is the actual design philosophy. And to achieve that, the engineers at Lockheed Martin and the military planners at the Pentagon built into this aircraft a combination of capabilities that, taken together, have never existed in any other production fighter in history. Let us go through them one by one, because each one is extraordinary on its own. But the combination of all of them together is what makes this aircraft something that the United States government decided it could never, under any circumstances, allow to fall into foreign hands. Start with stealth. And understand immediately that when we say stealth, we do not mean the aircraft is painted a dark color and hard to see with your eyes. We mean that to a radar system, this aircraft essentially does not exist. A typical fourth-generation fighter jet like an F-15 or a Eurofighter has a radar cross-section roughly equivalent to a large metal barn. It is a massive, screaming signal on any radar screen for hundreds of miles in every direction. The F-22's radar cross-section has been described by various sources as roughly the size of a metal marble. Some estimates say it is closer to a steel ball bearing. The precise number is classified. But the principle is clear. When the F-22 is flying toward you, your radar is not going to tell you it is there. Not until it is far, far too late. This is achieved through a combination of design choices that took decades to develop and perfect. The shape of the aircraft itself is designed to deflect radar waves away, rather than bouncing them back to the source. Every edge, every angle, every curve was calculated with radar signature in mind. The engine inlets are shaped in a way that prevents radar waves from entering and reflecting off the engine faces, which are one of the biggest sources of radar return on conventional jets. The weapons are carried internally in bays that stay closed until the moment of firing, which means there are no external missiles or bombs hanging off the wings, creating additional radar returns. The exhaust nozzles are shaped to reduce the infrared signature of the engines, making it harder for heat-seeking systems to detect the aircraft. The materials used in the skin of the aircraft, the coatings applied to its surface, the way panels are sealed and fastened, all of it is chosen to minimize radar reflection. And the specific details of how all of this is achieved, the exact materials, the precise coatings, the exact angles. That information is among the most closely guarded technical secrets in the United States military. And that is already the first reason why the F-22 has never been sold to an ally. Because selling the aircraft means transferring that knowledge. It means allowing foreign engineers to study those materials, those coatings, those angles. And once that knowledge exists outside of American hands, there is no getting it back. Now add to that stealth something that most people who are not aviation specialists do not think about, which is supercruise. Every conventional fighter jet that flies supersonic, meaning faster than the speed of sound, has to use afterburners to do it. An afterburner is essentially a raw fuel injector at the back of the engine that dumps enormous amounts of fuel into the exhaust to produce a massive surge of thrust. It is extraordinarily effective. It is also extraordinarily detectable. An afterburner produces a visible flame that can be seen for miles, an infrared signature that is extremely large, and a fuel consumption rate that is so extreme that a jet can only sustain it for a short period of time before it runs out of fuel. The F-22 can fly at supersonic speeds without using afterburner. That is what supercruise means. The Raptor can cruise at approximately Mach 1.5, roughly 1,100 miles per hour, using its engines at a normal power setting. This means two things that change everything about how this aircraft fights. First, it is significantly harder to detect because it is not producing the massive infrared flare of an afterburning engine. Second, it can sustain supersonic speed for extended periods without draining its fuel supply, which means it can cover ground quickly, engage targets, and reposition without having to slow back down to subsonic speeds to conserve fuel. When you combine supercruise with stealth, you begin to get a picture of an aircraft that can appear somewhere it was not expected, do what it needs to do, and disappear again before anyone fully comprehends what happened. Now let us talk about the sensors. Because this is where the F-22 starts to become something that transcends the traditional definition of a fighter aircraft. The AN/APG-77 radar that sits in the nose of the F-22 is not like the radar systems on older jets. It is an active electronically scanned array, which means instead of a physically rotating dish antenna bouncing radar waves in one direction at a time, it uses thousands of tiny transmitter and receiver elements that can each be controlled electronically and independently. This means the radar can do things that were previously impossible. It can look in multiple directions nearly simultaneously. It can rapidly shift frequency to avoid jamming. It can use low probability of intercept modes, where the radar operates in a way that makes it very difficult for the enemy to detect that it is even being used. The radar can scan for airborne threats while simultaneously tracking ground targets, simultaneously feeding data to weapon systems, and simultaneously sharing information with other aircraft, all at the same time. The processing power required to do this, the software that manages all of these functions, the integration of the radar output with the pilot's displays and the aircraft's weapons, that represents decades of research and development investment and some of the most sophisticated signal processing technology that exists anywhere in the world. And the pilot does not look at a traditional radar scope trying to interpret raw returns. The Raptor's avionics system fuses all of the sensor data, radar, electronic warfare systems, infrared sensors, data from other aircraft shared through a secure data link, and presents the pilot with a synthesized picture of the battlefield that is clearer and more complete than anything available on any other aircraft in any air force on the planet. The pilot knows where the threats are. The pilot knows which threat to engage first. The pilot knows the geometry of the engagement, the fuel state, the weapons available, all of it presented in a way that allows faster, better decisions under the extraordinary stress of combat. This sensor fusion capability is another one of those things that is genuinely unique to the F-22 and represents a level of classified technology integration that the United States government has made a deliberate decision not to transfer to any foreign nation. Because the software that does this, the algorithms, the processing architecture, those are not just useful for fighter jets. That knowledge has applications across defense systems broadly, and once you hand it over, it is gone. Now let us talk about the maneuvering capability, because even though the F-22 was designed to win before a visual fight ever starts, it was also designed to be absolutely lethal in a close-range engagement if one ever happens. The F-22 uses a system called thrust vectoring. The engine nozzles can physically pivot, directing thrust not just backward but at angles, which means the pilot can use engine power to pitch and yaw the aircraft in ways that conventional aerodynamic control surfaces alone cannot achieve. This allows the Raptor to point its nose in a direction that would be impossible or would cause it to stall and fall out of the sky in any other aircraft. In a turning fight, the ability to point your nose at the enemy faster than they can point at you is the difference between life and death. The F-22 can decelerate almost instantaneously, forcing an enemy aircraft that is following it to overshoot, putting the Raptor suddenly behind the enemy instead of in front of it. It can perform maneuvers that look physically impossible to observers on the ground and are effectively impossible to counter in the cockpit of any fourth-generation fighter. But here is the crucial point. The F-22 is designed so that a close-range dogfight should almost never happen to it. The entire architecture of the aircraft, the stealth, the sensors, the supercruise, the weapons, everything is built so that the Raptor kills at long range, from a position of invisibility, before the enemy even begins to react. The close-range maneuvering capability is a last resort. It is the backup plan for a situation that should theoretically never occur. The fact that the backup plan is also overwhelming is simply additional evidence of how completely this aircraft was designed to dominate every phase of air combat. Let us now talk about the weapons, because the weapons integration on the F-22 is another layer of this story that most people do not fully appreciate. The Raptor carries its weapons internally in 3 bays. There is a main weapons bay in the center of the fuselage and 2 smaller side bays, one on each side. In a standard air-to-air configuration, the main bay holds 6 AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles, which are radar-guided long-range missiles capable of engaging targets at distances of up to 60 miles. The side bays each hold 1 AIM-9 Sidewinder heat-seeking missile for close-range engagements. There is also an internal 20mm rotary cannon with 480 rounds. When the F-22 fires a missile, a door in the fuselage opens, a mechanism extends the missile into the airstream, the missile is released, and the door closes again. The entire sequence takes approximately 1 second. This matters because a radar cross-section that is the size of a marble only stays the size of a marble when those weapon bays are closed. The moment the doors open, there is a brief, larger radar return. The system is designed to minimize even that brief exposure. But the point is that the weapons integration is not just an afterthought. It is an integral part of the stealth architecture, and the specific mechanics of how that integration works, how the ejection systems function, how the doors are designed, how the radar signature changes and is managed during that brief moment, all of it is classified. Now let us get to the legal part of this story, because there is an actual law involved. In 1998, the United States Congress passed what became known as the Obey Amendment, named after Congressman David Obey of Wisconsin. This amendment explicitly prohibited the export of the F-22 to any foreign nation. It was written directly into law. This was not a policy decision by the Pentagon or the State Department that could be reversed with a memo. This was an act of Congress. To sell the F-22 to anyone, the law itself would have to be changed. And Congress, over many years and many requests, has never changed it. Why did Congress put this into law in the first place? The reasoning was multi-layered, and some of it was openly stated at the time. Part of it was about protecting the technology itself. The classified systems on the F-22, the stealth materials, the radar, the software, the processing systems, were considered so sensitive that the risk of technology transfer through export was considered unacceptable regardless of which ally was doing the buying. Part of it was about cost. The F-22 program was already extraordinarily expensive. The unit cost of each aircraft by the time the program was completed was somewhere in the range of $350 million per aircraft when all development costs are factored in. The program was under constant budget pressure. Adding the complexity of export versions, with whatever modifications would be required to make them exportable, was seen as adding cost and complexity the program could not absorb. And part of it was strategic. The United States military wanted to maintain a capability advantage that was genuinely exclusive. Not shared, not licensed, not partially transferred. Exclusive. The F-22 was that advantage, and Congress decided to protect it. Japan has perhaps been the most persistent in trying to acquire the F-22. Given its geographic position directly across the water from China and relatively close to North Korea, Japan has obvious and legitimate reasons to want the most capable air superiority fighter available. Japanese officials and Defense Ministry representatives raised the possibility of F-22 purchase multiple times over the years. American defense contractors explored the possibility. Studies were done, papers were written, and every time, the answer came back the same: the law prohibits it. Even a modified export version, sometimes called the F-22J in informal discussions, was explored and ultimately rejected because the modifications required to make the aircraft exportable, while protecting the most sensitive technologies, would have so significantly degraded the aircraft's capability that Japan would essentially have been buying an extremely expensive aircraft that was notably less capable than what the United States Air Force flies. And the United States Air Force, for its part, was not enthusiastic about a degraded version of its premier aircraft being operated by another Air Force, because comparisons would inevitably be made, and questions would inevitably be asked about exactly how much capability had been removed and why. Australia also explored F-22 acquisition seriously. Australia is a close ally with significant air defense responsibilities across a very large geographic area. The Royal Australian Air Force eventually moved forward with purchasing the F-35, which is a capable and advanced aircraft but is fundamentally different in its design philosophy from the F-22. The F-35 is primarily a strike aircraft with stealth characteristics. The F-22 is a dedicated air superiority platform built from the ground up to dominate other aircraft. They are complementary tools, not interchangeable ones. Israel, which operates perhaps the most sophisticated air force in its region, and which has historically been one of the most important recipients of American military technology, was also told no. Israel eventually also moved to the F-35, but the interest in the Raptor was real, and the denial was equally real. The reasons for all of these denials go beyond the law. The law is the mechanism, but the reasoning behind the law is what really tells the story. Let us talk about that reasoning in depth, because it gets into some genuinely fascinating territory about how military technology works and how once secret capabilities eventually stop being secret. When a country purchases a sophisticated military aircraft, they do not simply buy the planes and put pilots in them. They buy a support infrastructure. They buy maintenance contracts. They buy training. They buy spare parts. They buy technical manuals. They integrate the aircraft into their own military communication systems. They build maintenance facilities. They train their own technicians. Over time, they build up a community of people, engineers, technicians, operators, maintainers, who deeply understand how the aircraft works at a fundamental level. And here is the uncomfortable reality of international defense cooperation. No alliance, no matter how strong, no matter how long-standing, no matter how genuine the friendship and shared values, is permanent. Political relationships change, governments change, strategic interests diverge. What is a close ally today can be a neutral or even adversarial relationship in 20 or 30 years. The United States has learned this lesson before. American military equipment has ended up in unexpected hands before. Equipment sold to allies has been captured, has been studied, has been reverse engineered by adversaries. This is not speculation. It has happened. And with a conventional fourth-generation aircraft, the consequences of that are significant but manageable. With the F-22, the consequences of that kind of technology transfer would be categorically different, because the technology embedded in this aircraft is not just useful for making better fighter jets. The stealth coating materials, the radar absorption technologies, the sensor fusion software, the low probability of intercept radar techniques, all of these have applications that extend well beyond air combat. They have implications for ship design, for missile development, for ground-based radar systems, for electronic warfare broadly. Allowing a foreign nation, any foreign nation, to study these systems in the depth that comes with actually operating and maintaining the aircraft is a risk that successive American administrations have decided is not worth taking, regardless of the diplomatic cost of saying no. And there is another dimension to this that is rarely discussed openly but is absolutely real. The F-22 is not just a product of technology, it is a product of operational knowledge. The way the aircraft is flown, the tactics developed by American pilots over years of training and exercise, the specific techniques for using the radar in certain configurations, the way multiple Raptors coordinate with each other to cover the battle space, the precise methods for integrating the F-22 into a broader joint force operation involving bombers, tankers, surveillance aircraft, and surface ships, all of that operational knowledge is itself classified and itself valuable to an adversary. Sharing the aircraft means creating the conditions under which that operational knowledge gradually becomes accessible to people outside the American system. It does not happen immediately. It does not happen because someone deliberately leaks it. It happens because human beings talk to each other. Because pilots from allied nations exercise together. Because maintenance technicians share information. Because the aircraft gets seen and photographed and analyzed. The operational security around the F-22 in American hands is extraordinary and deliberate. Keeping that security intact while operating the aircraft with foreign nations would be essentially impossible. Now let us talk about what the F-22 actually means in a potential conflict, because this helps explain why the United States views exclusive possession of this capability as so strategically important. The primary threat environment that the F-22 was designed for, and that it continues to be designed for today, is a conflict with a near-peer adversary, which means specifically China or Russia, both of which operate advanced air defense systems and increasingly capable fighter aircraft of their own. China has the J-20, which is their first indigenously developed stealth fighter. Russia has the Su-57, which is also described as a stealth platform, though analysts debate how stealthy it actually is in practice. These are genuinely advanced aircraft. They are not to be dismissed. The air forces of China and Russia are not the same forces they were in the 1990s. They have invested heavily in closing the capability gap with the United States, and in a conflict scenario, the first hours would be decisive. In a major conflict with China, for example, the early air battles would determine whether the United States and its allies could establish air superiority over contested areas, which would then determine whether ground and naval forces could operate freely, which would ultimately determine the outcome of the broader conflict. The F-22's role in that scenario is to go in first, before the electronic warfare aircraft, before the strike packages, before anything else that needs to survive. The Raptor goes in, clears the airspace of enemy fighters, suppresses or destroys air defense systems, and opens the door for everything that follows. It does this from stealth, from a position of sensor advantage, at supersonic speed, at ranges where it cannot be detected or engaged. The aircraft that makes that possible is not a capability the United States is willing to share, because the United States needs to be able to do that mission even when its allies are not present, even when the coalition is thin, even when the situation is worse than expected. The F-22 is the card you hold back. It is the capability you keep in your own hand, and the only way to keep it in your own hand is to never give it to someone else. Let us talk about the production numbers, because they are part of this story too, and they are frankly astonishing given the capability of the aircraft. The United States originally planned to purchase approximately 750 F-22s. That number was later reduced to 648, then to 339, then to 187. The final production number was 187 aircraft, with 8 of those being test aircraft not available for combat operations, bringing the operational fleet to approximately 179 aircraft. 179 aircraft, for the most powerful air force on the planet. That is a remarkably small number, spread across multiple bases, with some aircraft always in maintenance, some in training, some being upgraded. The number of combat-ready F-22s available at any given moment for deployment is considerably smaller than the total fleet would suggest. The decision to cap production at that number was driven by cost. Each aircraft was extraordinarily expensive. The development costs were enormous and had to be amortized across the production run. As production numbers were cut, the cost per aircraft went up, which led to further cuts, which led to even higher per unit costs, which is the classic death spiral of defense procurement. By the time the decision was made to end production in 2011, restarting the line would have cost an estimated $3 billion just to reopen the factories and retrain the workforce, before a single new aircraft was built. That restart has never happened. The line is gone. The F-22 fleet that exists today is the fleet that will exist for the foreseeable future, until the next generation of aircraft eventually replaces it. And here is the strategic irony of those production numbers. Because there are so few of them, the F-22 is even more precious than it would have been if the original procurement numbers had been met. Every single airframe is irreplaceable. Every one that is lost, to accident, to mishap, to any cause, cannot be replaced. The Air Force manages this fleet with extraordinary care. There have been serious restrictions on certain flight maneuvers, not because the aircraft cannot perform them, but because the cost of an accident in an F-22 is the permanent loss of a capability that cannot be rebuilt. The scarcity of the aircraft is itself a reason not to share it. Selling F-22s to allies would reduce the number of aircraft in the American inventory. It would create a production line and support infrastructure that would exist outside of American control. It would distribute a finite and irreplaceable capability across multiple operators. And in a crisis, the United States would have fewer of its most capable aircraft, while having no guarantee that an ally's F-22s would be available, committed, or even serviceable in the exact moment they were needed. Now, let us go deeper into the technology, because there is a specific aspect of the F-22's classified capabilities that rarely gets discussed in public and that represents perhaps the most sensitive piece of the entire aircraft: the electronic warfare suite. The F-22 carries an integrated electronic warfare system that does things that have not been fully disclosed publicly. What is known is that it can detect, analyze, and respond to radar emissions and other electronic threats in ways that go beyond what previous aircraft could do. It can passively detect enemy radars without emitting anything itself. It can geolocate threats. It can feed that information into the sensor fusion picture so that the pilot has awareness of the electronic threat environment alongside the physical threat environment. What is not publicly known and what is highly classified is the specific capabilities of the system in terms of what frequencies it can detect, what it can do to actively jam or disrupt enemy systems, how quickly it can identify and respond to new threat types it has not encountered before. Electronic warfare is an area where the United States has invested enormously and where maintaining an advantage is considered absolutely critical. The specific signatures that American systems are optimized to detect, the specific vulnerabilities in enemy systems that American electronic warfare exploits. That is information that, if transferred to a foreign nation, could potentially find its way to the adversary who designed those systems and allow them to patch those vulnerabilities. The electronic warfare capability of the F-22 is therefore not just a feature of the aircraft. It is a window into the broader American understanding of adversary electronic systems. Sharing it means sharing that window, and that is a risk that goes well beyond the aircraft itself. Let us also talk about the software, because in modern military aircraft, the software is not a secondary consideration. The software is the aircraft. The F-22's flight control software, its radar processing software, its sensor fusion algorithms, its electronic warfare software, its weapons systems integration software, all of this taken together represents an investment in intellectual property and a concentration of classified technical knowledge that is staggering in its scope. The software that runs the F-22 is upgraded regularly as new threats emerge, as new capabilities are developed, as lessons are learned from training and exercises. The aircraft that sits on the flight line today is significantly more capable than the aircraft that first flew operationally because the software that drives its systems has been continuously refined and improved. Managing that software, ensuring its security, controlling who has access to the source code, that is a significant ongoing security operation in its own right. Extending that operation to foreign operators, giving foreign maintenance technicians access to the software systems that make the aircraft work, creating the conditions under which that code could be copied, accessed, or reverse engineered. That is simply not something the American security system can accommodate. There is also a maintenance dimension to this story that is worth understanding. The F-22 is a complex aircraft to maintain. The stealth coatings require specific treatment. They are not infinitely durable. They require regular inspection and repair. The materials used in those coatings are not ordinary aircraft materials. The processes for applying and repairing them are specific and require trained technicians with specialized knowledge and specialized equipment. Maintaining the stealth characteristics of the aircraft requires ongoing, careful, technically sophisticated work. If the F-22 were operated by a foreign air force, that foreign air force would need to maintain those coatings, which means they would need access to those materials, those processes, those techniques, which is another vector through which the stealth technology could propagate to parties who were never supposed to have it. Every layer of the F-22 story leads back to the same conclusion. The technology is so integrated, so comprehensive, and so fundamentally classified that there is no way to sell the aircraft without also selling the secrets. And the secrets are the point. Now let us talk about what has happened instead, because the United States has not left its allies without capable aircraft. The F-35 Lightning II exists precisely because the United States recognized that it needed a modern stealth aircraft that could be shared with partners. The F-35 was designed from the beginning as a joint program with multiple allied nations as full development partners with the explicit intention of producing a capable, stealthy, advanced aircraft that could be exported and operated internationally. Australia flies it, the United Kingdom flies it, Israel flies it, Japan flies it, Norway flies it, the Netherlands flies it, and more nations are joining that list. The F-35 is genuinely a remarkable aircraft. Do not misunderstand what is being said here. The F-35 is a serious, capable, advanced aircraft that outclasses most of what it will face in any realistic conflict scenario. But the F-35 and the F-22 are different animals designed for different primary purposes. The F-35's stealth is real, but its radar cross-section is generally described as larger than the F-22's. The F-35 does not supercruise. It is not optimized for the kind of pure, dedicated air-to-air dominance that the F-22 was built to provide. The F-35 is a multi-role strike aircraft with significant stealth characteristics. The F-22 is an air superiority aircraft built from first principles around the concept of invisible, long-range, lethal dominance of the airspace. By offering allies the F-35, the United States has given them a genuinely capable, genuinely stealthy, genuinely modern aircraft. But it has kept for itself the capability that sits at the very top of the air superiority pyramid. And there is a logic to that which is not cynical. It is strategic. An alliance is strongest when each member contributes something. The United States contributes the F-22 capability, the ability to go into the most contested airspace on the planet and clear it for everyone else. Allies contribute their own capabilities, their own geography, their own forces. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And the arrangement only works if the United States actually retains a capability that is genuinely exclusive, genuinely dominant, genuinely irreplaceable within the coalition structure. The F-22 is that capability. Let us now address something that often comes up in discussions of the F-22 export ban, which is the argument that it could have been modified for export. There were serious proposals made, particularly in relation to Japan's interest, for an export version of the F-22 that would have had certain classified systems removed or replaced with less sensitive alternatives, certain stealth characteristics simplified or degraded, certain software systems replaced with export-controlled but less sensitive versions. These proposals were studied. Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer, was genuinely interested in the commercial opportunity. Japan was genuinely interested in the aircraft. The numbers were run, and the conclusion reached by American defense planners was uncomfortable but clear. The modifications required to make the F-22 exportable without compromising critical classified technology would have degraded the aircraft so significantly that what Japan would have received would have been a fourth-generation aircraft in a stealth-shaped body, carrying a price tag that reflected the F-22's development costs, but delivering performance that did not justify that price. The whole point of the F-22 is the integration of all of its systems at the highest possible level of sophistication. Stealth without supercruise is less effective. Supercruise without the sensor fusion does not deliver the tactical advantage. The sensor fusion without the classified radar modes loses much of its edge. The radar without the full electronic warfare suite is more vulnerable. Every system depends on every other system. Pulling out the classified components does not just remove those components. It degrades the entire capability of the aircraft in ways that cascade through everything else it does. This integration is deliberate. It is one of the reasons the aircraft is so capable, and it is one of the reasons it cannot be exported without becoming something fundamentally different and significantly lesser. There is one more dimension of this story that deserves serious attention, and it is the most forward-looking part of the conversation. The F-22, as it exists today, is an extraordinary machine, but the F-22 as it will exist in the future, as upgrades continue and its capabilities are expanded, is something even more significant. The United States Air Force has been working on upgrades to the F-22 that include improved radar capabilities, enhanced electronic warfare systems, the ability to carry new weapons including hypersonic weapons, improved data links that allow greater integration with other aircraft and systems, and enhanced sensor capabilities that push the aircraft even further ahead of any adversary. Each generation of upgrades embeds new classified technology into the aircraft. Each upgrade makes the export problem more acute. The F-22 of 2025 is harder to export than the F-22 of 2005 was, because it carries more layers of classified advancement. And the F-22 of 2035, if the upgrade programs continue, will be harder still. The aircraft is not standing still. It is evolving. And as it evolves, the argument for keeping it exclusively American grows stronger, not weaker. There is also a development called the Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program, sometimes referred to as Loyal Wingman programs, which involves autonomous or semi-autonomous unmanned aircraft that can fly alongside crewed fighters. The F-22 is being considered as a potential controller aircraft for these systems. An F-22 flying invisibly into contested airspace, accompanied by a small fleet of autonomous wingmen carrying additional weapons or sensors, is a tactical combination that takes the Raptor's existing advantages and amplifies them substantially. The details of how this integration will work are of course classified, but the concept represents the next evolution of what the F-22 is and what it can do. And sharing that evolution, allowing a foreign operator to participate in developing and understanding how crewed stealth fighters integrate with autonomous systems, is something that falls so far outside what American technology security policy would allow that it does not need to be debated. It is simply not going to happen. Let us zoom out for a moment and think about what all of this means in the broader context of American military power. The United States has made a strategic choice. It has chosen to maintain, at great expense and with great deliberateness, a capability in the form of the F-22 that is exclusively American. It has made that choice at the cost of alliance relationships, at the cost of commercial revenue that the aircraft could have generated, at the cost of industrial efficiency that broader production runs would have provided. It has made that choice knowingly and repeatedly, over decades, through multiple administrations of both political parties, with congressional support that has survived changing political winds and changing defense budgets. That consistency is itself a message. It says that the United States government, the Pentagon, the military leadership, and the legislative branch all agree that some capabilities are too important, too sensitive, and too fundamental to American strategic advantage to be shared with anyone, even friends. It says that in the calculus of national security, the value of exclusive possession of the most advanced air superiority capability on the planet outweighs all of the other considerations. And when you understand what the F-22 actually does, when you understand how it works, and why it was built, and what it was built to do, that calculus is not difficult to follow. This aircraft was designed to go where no other aircraft can go, see what no other aircraft can see, kill what no other aircraft can kill, and come home from places where no other aircraft would survive. That is not a capability you share. That is a capability you guard. The pilots who fly the F-22, and there are a small number of them, because the fleet is small and the training pipeline is demanding, are among the most carefully selected and trained aviators in the world. They go through years of preparation before they ever sit in a combat-ready Raptor. They train constantly. They think constantly about the tactics, the techniques, the procedures that extract maximum capability from the aircraft. They are not simply flying a machine. They are operating at the apex of what human beings and technology can achieve together in the air. And the knowledge those pilots carry, the understanding they have developed of what the aircraft can do and how to make it do those things at the critical moment, is itself a classified asset. The F-22 pilot community is small and extraordinarily cohesive. They know each other. They train together. They develop tactics together. They are a community of practitioners at the cutting edge of air combat capability. That community and the knowledge it holds is as important as the aircraft itself, and it is just as carefully protected. Let us come back to where we started. The F-22 has never been sold to an ally, not because the United States does not trust its allies, not because the aircraft is somehow not good enough to share. Precisely the opposite. The aircraft is too good to share. It is too important. It carries too many secrets in too many layers, from the stealth coatings on its surface, to the source code running its computers, to the operational knowledge of the pilots who fly it. Every element of this aircraft is the product of decades of research, billions of dollars of investment, and some of the most sophisticated engineering and software development ever applied to a military system. And collectively, all of those elements add up to something that the United States government has determined, clearly and repeatedly, belongs exclusively to the United States. The Allies get the F-35. It is a very good aircraft, but the F-22 stays home, and the next time you see footage of a Raptor at an air show, doing its impossible maneuvers, hovering almost motionless in the air before slamming into a vertical climb that vanishes it into the sky, understand that what you are watching is not just an impressive aircraft. What you are watching is the deliberate, carefully maintained, extremely expensive exclusive property of one nation, the most contested piece of aerospace real estate in the world, a machine so capable, so secret, and so strategically important that the answer to every allied nation that has ever asked to buy one has been, and remains, no. And that no is not going away. If you made it this far, you already know this kind of content is worth your time. Hit the like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. The world of military aviation is full of stories that most people never hear. We are here to tell them.